In this tutorial, we're going to cover unwrapping UVs. What UVs are is like the coordinate systems of where you're going to put your colors and your textures. Maybe not so much the colors if you're going to color something, but for textures, we need to know where they're going to go. So for an example, let's say, let's pull up the window. Let me switch out that. That guy's already unwrapped. So let me go grab one that's already not unwrapped yet. So close. Alright, so here we last left off with this guy who's not unwrapped. So if I go up to Display, Window, Rendering Editors, and Hypershade. So going here, Hypershade is the texturing and coloring option. So we pull up the Hypershade and it pops it open on the side. So what we have here is, let's say I can make any color I want. Right now Lambert 1 is what's on them. I can use like shiny, balloon, and strophic, fong, or whatever. Let's say I take the fong, I click on that and it creates this shape. I can middle mouse drag this onto the character and it creates a shiny shader on the character. So that's texturing using the Hypershade. If I wanted to change the colors, I would go over to, actually double click on the color. It pops it up over here and color is right there, it's gray. I can pick a gold type of coloring for the armor. Sure, that's good enough for gold. So it's gold and it's shiny, which is great and simple and easy to do if all you're going to do is put a color. But as soon as you want to put a texture on there, you're going to have an issue with that. So let's say I make a new one, I make a regular Lambert one, so the fog went up to there in our storage area. So the Lambert right here, I do the same process. Instead of clicking color, I can click on this little black and white checkered, which is our map, and I can click on file at that point. Might have been a little too quick, so click on that. Actually, it didn't give me the option again. Break action. Alright, so here again, you click on the black and white checkered and you see the word file. There's lots of other options here, but let's click file again, and it prompts you to asking which file do you want. So if I click on the file, and let's say I grab the fabric test. I pulled one off the internet, just a generic fabric, kind of with like pattern on there, I guess. So I open that, and so now the fabric gets attached to here. If I want to go backwards in the menu system, it's clicking this one. This is that's actually backwards. This one's forwards. So forwards back to where the color is now a map. And if I go over here to the texture nodes, I can take this node and move it, and this node move it, and this one, and it looks like there's a combination of lots of different options. So that's there, we have this here, and so what's happening is this is your texture placement, this is what texture you're using, and this is your final shader in the end. So you're combining all these different options. And so this one, if I middle mouse click and drag onto the chess piece, suddenly it's like, well, what just happened? Shouldn't this be like one even consistent object or color, I guess? Because that's what it looked like in the preview window. What is this big patch in the middle? Okay, let's drag it on something else. I drag it on, let's say, the leather up here. Well, that's sort of right, but it's kind of like stretching in a way. Drag it on the shirt, and it's like, wow, what just happened here? And the whole arm is being streaked. The texture is being pulled and stretched super amounts, and here it's being stretched, but the rest of it looks okay, and this is really condensed, and it's like, why isn't this even? And I only want to texture the shirt with the texture. How do I only texture just the shirt? So that's what unwrapping is. Unwrapping is telling what specific areas will get assigned what specific colors or materials and textures. So again, just dragging a color on there, it looks perfectly fine. I could drag colors and everything, and it's perfectly fine. But as soon as you want to start incorporating textures, you have to know what the UV layouts are. Alright, so let me take this guy and slide him over to the original guy. Not the original, but the finished guy. And jump the camera over there. And let me set up the workspace to make this a little easier for unwrapping. So let me slide this over here. Actually, we're going to make one more texture, so I'll leave that open for now. And I'll close that out. Give me some more space. And I'm going to click on this one right here out of the multiple options. By clicking on this, it pops out this, which I don't need. But if I slide it further over here, I can leave this sitting here, and now I can spin the screen a little easier rather than trying to spin the screen while half it's hidden underneath. It kind of just squares out the viewport a little easier for me. So I'm going to pop that open. Alright, so what we want to do is to try and figure out this stretching effects, and the easiest way to do that is to put a checker pattern on there. So if I've already created one here, but if I made a new, let's say Lambert, pops the Lambert down in my workspace, and then while on here I click the checkered pattern, and I put the checker pattern down here, and the shape, and let's rearrange that. So now I can take and middle mouse drag onto the checker pattern onto the Lambert, and then use the default, and it automatically puts the color onto the shader, and then I can middle mouse drag onto the character, and boom, it drops it on here, so we can tell what is being stretched and not. Also, let's double click on the shader that I've just made and go to backwards on this setting. So forwards goes back to the final end result, backwards goes to the map we're using, which is this one, and back again goes to the placement section. So that's your forwards and backwards on the textures. I'm going to use the repeat UVs and set this to, let's say, 25 by 25. So it repeats it a lot more. So now we can start to see that this is super condensed in here, and this is a lot more open. So the objective is to make these all uniform squares, and so by doing checker pattern we can tell that a lot easier. So now I don't need this anymore, and we can use our checker patterns right here. Next up, I need to open Window, UV Texture Editor. This will open a window that allows us to edit how these textures are looking on the screen. So I click on UV Texture Editor, and it pops open a new window. I'm going to start rearranging the workspace a little bit, so I'm going to slide this up a little higher so I can grab these easier, slide that down a little lower so I can still see that, and eventually I'll fill up more of these workspace areas. So if I don't see anything now in the workspace here, this is our grid of where we're going to lay out the pieces. I click on the piece right here, and it shows the image in the background, which is the texture. I can click on high quality, which isn't much better, but it filters the image a little better, or I can just turn it off, which in this case I'm going to turn it off because I don't need to see the black and white squares. So what we should be seeing is a nice clean shape, but all we see is a bunch of lines and we can't really make sense of it, and that's why the textures are being so distorted. So we need to create UVs that better match what we're looking for. So up here, when you're in the polygon mode, we have create UVs. If I click on that, it pops out a whole bunch of different options. I can also click this little dash bar right here, and that pops out the window. By doing that, I don't have to constantly click down here. I can just from now on use this window that's been popped open. Also, if your screen is very blurry, it's probably because of the renderer. If you click on renderer here, default quality is very blurry. So the screen runs faster, your graphics card will work faster, nothing will lag as much, but you can't really see what you're working on. So change the render right here. This is for your viewport. You can change it to high quality rendering, and it starts to look a little better. It's still a little blurry, but it works pretty decent. You can try with the newer versions of Maya. I'm running 2014. I think a couple years recently they came out with Viewport 2.0. With this one, it does super high resolution, but it can be a little taxing on your graphics card, so if you're lagging a lot, you might need to step down to a lower version. With Viewport 2.0, they also give you a couple other options, like you can turn on ambient occlusion, which gives a little bit more shadowing as you're doing things, anti-aliasing, which makes things a little more clear. So a couple extra options to play around with. But anyway, so we see the nice clear options, or clear textures, but we need to fix them on here, and they're still blurry there. So we're going to go to planar mapping. You have to click the object first, and then click planar mapping. I click this and go to the settings, and I'm going to use best plane. Bounding box, it picks all kind of crazy directions, but best plane seems to work pretty decent. You click apply, and it creates a plane, and you can see instantly that it's automatically fixing the problem. I'm going to rotate this a little more straight on, and then you can see as I'm changing stuff here, it's affecting what I'm seeing on the screen, and that's because if I had this on, you can see it. The image I'm seeing on the screen here is what is being projected onto our object. So I'm going to, let's say, resize this a little smaller, so I can click off of this, and I can try and click this by dragging it across there, but your move and you rotate and scale don't work in UV Editor. In Maya 2015, I think they fixed that, so you can actually use the tools here. For some reason in 2014 and lower, you can't use your tools in this window, at least not in edge mode. So if you right click, you can still use edge, vertex, UV, and face. But in 2014 and earlier, the only way to move something is to go to UV mode, and then you can grab the UVs, and then your move, rotate, and scale work. But if you're in edge mode, you don't get those options of move, rotate, scale. You can see them changing here, but it doesn't affect it here. It's a nice change that they finally made, that you can grab these in 2015 without having to go into UV mode. But since I'm writing 2014, I'll have to keep going to UV mode. Again, and at vertex mode, you can grab the vertices, but you can't do anything with them, so it's pointless to even have these modes listed if you can't grab them. So UV mode will allow you to grab these things. I can scale this smaller. You can see that it's changing what we're seeing on the orientation of the screen. But as nice as it looks in the front, you can also notice that the sides are getting a bit streaked because it's projecting from planar maps straight on. So straight on looks perfect, but at an angle, it gets a bit distorted. So in order to fix the distortion, we can pull up Polygon's Unfold option and click the square. And we have a few options here. Local Solver seems to work best most of the time. Pin UVs, you can probably uncheck all these. You probably don't need any of these. None for the constraints, and iterations will switch between 10 and higher numbers later. But if you're set to like 5,000, you might want to set it down a little bit lower to 10 so we can play around with some settings. And that should work for these settings. So when you press apply, it automatically should unwrap and unfold your UVs. So you can see now that it's a lot more uniform. There's no more streaking coming across the edges, it's unwrapping it. I can keep pressing apply, and it gradually keeps trying as best as it can to square off all the different textures, or squares. But when you get close to the edge, you can still get a little bit of distortions, so it's usually best if you cut the corners like an actual square, or like a globe, I guess. You can't take a spherical globe, cut it in half, and push it flat on a piece of paper. You have to cut it a little bit more in order to get it as flat as possible. You can't flatten a sphere and expect it not to rip to pieces as you're trying to push down. So we need to cut the edges to basically rip it a little bit so it can relax a little better. It does look pretty decent here, but depending on how we look around at different options, it could be a little distorted. So I'm going to go into edge mode. Actually, before I do that, if I click on show, let's say go to object mode, click the object I want to look at, show, isolate selected, view selected. By clicking this, it hides everything else. So the only thing I'm looking at right now is the piece that's currently selected. And from the back side, you can see that it does have the distortions on the back. It's not really a big deal since the front looks fine, but it does have a little bit of distortions on the back. So to fix this, you would go to edge mode, click the edge you want. So I'll grab this one and this one, since these are covered by the leather straps anyway. By doing that, it automatically selects these two edges right here, and I can use the scissors now. But the scissors only work if you right click and go into edge mode ahead of time in the UV editor. Really annoying why you have to pick your certain mode before you can use certain tools up here, otherwise the tool just doesn't work and you're like, why doesn't it work? I'm hoping 2015 fixed that also, but we'll see. So I can pick cut mode while we're in edge mode and the edge is selected. I can cut it, and you can see it pops out a little bit because something changed. Now if I go to UV mode, I can select these and go to the unfold option again, just press apply. And you can see that as I press apply, it split this apart a little bit, and by splitting it apart, it's starting to relax these areas. So let's do that a few more times. Let's grab edge mode. I'm going to grab this one up here, and oops, this one. So I'll take both of these, and this one, that one, and holding shift I can keep grabbing the bunch of these at once. So I've grabbed all the corners now. We're still in edge mode. I can cut these, then go to UV mode. I can select one of the, or a section of these, hold the control key, hold the right mouse button, and go to shell. And that selects all of them. So rather than me having to export or select everything, if they get stacked on top of each other, shell is the quick way of grabbing your whole object. Now I can go to apply, and it starts relaxing this a bit more and squaring it out a lot more accurately. And you can jump the iterations to, let's say, 100 and try it again, but that's kind of a bit drastic, so I'm going to set that back to 10. Sometimes the iterations are a bit too high, so definitely don't do 5,000. So we can keep playing with that. If it looks a little distorted, you can still grab some of these, try and pull it, straighten out a little better, and then grab it again and apply again. And it should automatically relax it into position. And this is using local. If I set it to global, it tends to function a little bit differently, and then I can set it back to local and apply it again. You can see it keeps changing, and I keep clicking and clicking so I can constantly do 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 at a time. Jumping to 100 can, as you saw, distort things. Alright, so now what we have here on the back side is that I can close out that as well, save me some screen space. It's a lot less distorted on the back, and everything else is pretty much all perfect squares. So that's the basic process of creating UVs. So now, if I go to object mode, whatever texture I put in there, if I middle mouse take this Lambert and drop it on there, you can see that it's perfectly in place. So we have the exact texture pattern that we're looking for now. There's no mishaps, no stretch marks. It's a perfect match. And if I put a checker pattern on here, it works there, and I have another checker pattern. It's a little more dense, and it's perfect. So we're done with that piece. I can put the gray Lambert back on there, but I'll leave the checker pattern so I know which pieces are done. Go back to show, isolate selected, view selected, will show me everything else. And I'm going to go put the Lambert on here. So I can, I'll work with the gray. Everything not done is gray, and everything done will be already checker patterned. So the last thing is I'm going to UV mode, grab all of these, and scale this a little bit smaller, and move this somewhere off the grid. For texturing, we need to have everything inside this upper right square, but since I'm not done yet, I'm going to keep moving it off the grid because everything will always appear in this area, and that can get a little condensed. So I'm just going to keep scattering things around the grid until I can UV everything. So let's go back to object mode, click on this, and you can see it appears in the top right grid. Every object I pick will be in the top right grid. They'll be very messy, and I need to make these nice and clear and readable. In the end, we're going to take this into Photoshop, and I'm going to paint and color these different pieces. So I'll basically have a template that I can say this is going to be metal, and I can put a metal texture in here. I can grab the face and everything. So if I click on the character right here, for example, it's already finished. All these pieces have already been cut out. So I can see that for the faces, the pants, the hands, the hair, the sleeves, the armor pieces, all of his belts and boots and stuff, the cloak right there, they've all been cut out nice and neatly, so I can easily go into Photoshop and color this and texture this. And then they'll all get assigned perfectly back onto the character. So he's finished, but this guy, he still has to go through a whole bunch, and you can see it's a complete mess. If I were to try and color something, I have no idea what goes where, and it gets all jumbled and garbled, which is what's happening when we put the textures on them. So let's keep going. I'll click on this, and again, I can go to show, isolate selected, view selected, hide everything, F on the keyboard to fit it, and then I can spin around this one little piece. It's distorting in the corners, so we're going to fix this. Let's go through and go to face mode. I'll take all the bottom side first. Almost there. Alright, so the entire bottom section's been clicked on the faces, and it selects these, and you can see they're definitely not in a readable order that we can figure out what's happening with. So once these are selected, I can go to create UVs, which the window is already open right here. I'll put that up there. Alright, and slide this over a little more. So trying to create a work environment that works a little better. Alright, so planar mapping, we have a couple other mapping options. I'm going to use planar again because it's mostly a flat plane. So I click on plane and it looks automatically like it perfectly matches because we picked everything on one plane. I can go over here to move this over here if I want, and then click off of it. Or click the move tool and then there you go, click off it on the screen here, that it works. Alright, so we've UV or laid out that, but we still have the rest of these, and I can't grab these. So I'm going to go to UV or at face mode, and then I can grab them in face mode. You can't create UVs unless you're selected on the faces. So I can try and grab this in UV mode and click on planar mapping, but nothing's going to happen because it can only do that in face mode. So back to face mode, grab these that I want, planar mapping, and a planar mapping grabs the rest of them. So now I have both sides. I'll take this again, and you can't unfold the faces, so you have to right click and go to UV mode and then select the UVs. I'll do it on both of these and press apply so I can unfold these. In 2015 they might have fixed that option, but for now I have to keep switching to UV to actually use these options. Alright, and by doing that it pretty much makes everything nice and clean and perfect. I'll try and make these respective sizes, so if I move this over here, W for move, R for scale, they should be about the same size. I'm going to make this a little smaller because it's on the underside. And then again, there's a little bit of distortion coming here. You can see it's getting really wide. So I'm going to cut those edges again. So let's go back to edge mode and select this one and this one. Flip around to the side, select this one and this one. And I can keep cutting higher up, but you're going to get seams and your textures may not match anymore. So it's best not to have seams. So cut them in spots that are very inconspicuous. So I click the cut option, and that cuts their vertices. Now I can go back to UVs and relax these. And you can see here that it's split those corners and should work pretty well for us now. Sometimes the relax tool doesn't always work. In this case, the edge tool also didn't seem to work very well. So let's cut that again. UV mode, break that apart, perfect. So now that fixed that. So let's grab all this again and just keep clicking that a couple times to smooth it out. Alright, and you can see that it's a lot more uniform now. It's not stretched and distorted in the corners. So that pretty much finishes this piece. I'm going to scale this down pretty small. In the end, we need to fit everything in this one square. So let's put that over here. That piece is done. And go back to object mode and show isolate selected, view selected. So it pops everything back to here. And I'm going to drag the checker pattern on there. So that's done. The circle part should be relatively simple. We could leave it as an existing texture already. It is pretty uniform, but it's probably going to be easier for me to just paint the whole circle as one piece rather than these corresponding pieces as being separate. So I can just go planar mapping, planar, and just have a whole circle. So whatever I paint on the circle will be the end result. So let's scale that again. Press R for scale, go to UV mode. Scale that down really small because it's a really small piece and doesn't need a lot of space. I'll drop that in the corner and go right click object mode and drag one of these textures on there. Boom. And we're good. And you can see the texture sizes are different in relation to each other. So if I click these three, it lists all the pieces I have so far. This piece has a lot more density of the textures. That's because it's a lot larger in comparison to the other pieces. So if I go to UV mode, and since these are almost slightly overlapping, I can just grab a portion of it, hold control, hold right click, and go to shell, and it grabs just that one piece. And then I can scale with the R button and make it even smaller so that the squares all match. If this square were larger, it's going to have more density, and the more density it has, the better resolution you're going to get with your textures. Unfortunately, it takes up a lot of space because they all have to fit in here. So if anything, the face should be the one that gets the largest percentage of the square. So you, in other words, want to try and make sure all your squares are the same size. And that way everything is equal distribution on the texture pattern. Alright, so that more or less covers all the basics of how this is going to work. It's going to be the same process for everything else, but let's do something more complicated now. So I'm going to grab the face, and you can see the face is a big mess. Aside from the planar mapping, we can also use automatic mapping. Automatic mapping automatically maps it for you. So I can grab this, drop it on here, and boom, it's automatically mapped. So why would I bother doing planar mapping and everything else when the automatic does it perfect? It only does it perfect to a degree. You can see the seams here. So when you try and paint your textures in Photoshop, you're going to get these seams that don't quite make sense. I can take the other pattern here, and you can see you're getting these marks on here which that shouldn't be there. You're not going to have these slices in someone's skin like that. So what we need to do to fix that is to glue these back together or sew these back together in a way that gets rid of all these seams, and the seams are corresponding to the outside edges here. So the fastest way to do this, let's say I'm going to go to right click UV mode, select part of these, go to shell, which is control and right mouse button, and then move these over here to match with the other side, and then repeat that process, move these to match here. And this looks like it's the top of the head, and this is the back of the head, which I'll get to later, but let's rotate that around for now. Alright, and let's try and get rid of this little part inside the mouth. So I'm going to go, I guess, face mode, grab that, and then start getting rid of everything else using control so I can deselect these extra pieces. Alright, so the only thing left here, I'm going to go planar mapping, and that basically rips it off the other piece and puts it somewhere else. And then I can scale that, or I can't scale until it's UV mode, and then it's deselected. Alright, so scale that small and put that over there where the mouth is. Alright, so that's been ripped off of there. So now let's go to edge mode and start sewing these things together. Now this could take a lot of time to meticulously grab this one to figure out where these pieces need to be sewn together at. And you're like, oh, well, this piece corresponds to that piece. And I click on this, and that piece corresponds to that piece. So it kind of lights up and tells you where these pieces need to go. So if I click this move and sew button, it'll move and sew that piece together. I can click this one and move and sew, and it starts sewing these pieces together one by one. Also, I'm using the 3 mode on the keyboard. If I press 1, it goes back to the more straight line original, whereas 3 kind of rounds everything. So I'm going to go back to 1 just so it makes it easier to see what I'm looking at. And instead of going one by one and trying to merge all these, merge and move and sew, I can just take a whole chunk of these and move and sew, and it takes a whole bunch together. I can grab the entire eye socket and go move and sew, and grab it again, move and sew, and one more time, move and sew. So it's grabbing all these tiny little pieces, which I don't know what is what, to be able to paint these in Photoshop, and it moves it in place. So I can grab all of this and go, you can see here it's grabbing the corresponding pieces that I need. It already knows where they are, move and sew, and it grabs them out of the puzzle piece area and puts them in together. And sometimes it doesn't have all of them, so we grab it again and miss the piece there. So move and sew, and that should fit the eye back together. I can grab these, move and sew, grab this, actually be careful of the mouth area. I don't want to grab too much of the mouth, the inside part. So let's grab just the outer area of the mouth, move and sew. Nope, it brought those in with it. So let's try and be a little more careful from grabbing that. Move, nope, still got that. Alright, let's just grab little pieces at a time. Alright, and that's mostly what we're going to get for this. I can probably move some of these together, move these together, and so it works pretty quick to do all this. Let's move and sew for the ear, grab it again. You can see there's still more pieces for the ear because it got pretty separated. Move and sew, grab the ear again just in case. Yep, there's still more. And then try it again. I don't see anything else. So we've got one ear in there. And repeat this process. until all the rest of the ear pieces have been dropped in place, and that looks pretty good right now. And then we can start and put the forehead back together as well, move and sew, and so it connects all these pieces. So if I go to UV mode, select this, go to the shell, so it grabs everything, and then apply our unfold options, it starts to unfold this and put this in a recognizable order. It's still not completely sewn together, and you can't, just like you can't take a globe and flatten the globe, you have to slice it somewhere. So usually the best spot to slice something is where you're never going to see the slice. And I'm never going to see the one under his hair, so I might as well slice under his hair. And I probably won't see it very well on the neck area under the chin, so I'll slice that. So I'll slice from the top all the way down the back of his head so I can peel that off, and slice under here to peel that out. And it's usually a pretty good place to hide things. So I go to edge mode and start grabbing some of these edges. I still don't see the edges, so I can keep going lower. I still don't see it. I start to see it now, so I may not want to grab this last edge. So I'll deselect that one. And now I can click cut since I'm in edge mode. Click cut, and it cuts that. You don't see a noticeable difference just yet. And then I'm going to grab from the neck upward, so grabbing up to here, you can see that it grabs these pieces. And I can probably grab one more all the way up to the chin. Or I can probably leave that one, deselect that one. And so we'll cut that as well. And so now when I go to UV mode, actually I might as well merge these edges as well. Move and sew. Alright, so UV mode, to shell, and apply. So now it's separating where it needs to separate. And now I can go back to edges and move and sew these together. And move and sew these together. Put some more of these together. Actually, it's grabbing it from up there. And this would be probably the back of the head, so let's grab the rest of these edges. And cut those apart so I can split the back of his head, and then get the rest of these edges and move and sew these all together. So move and sew, and move and sew. So now I go to UV mode and unfold it, and you can see that it's creating two halves of his head. So split his head and you get the left and the right half, but they're merged in the middle. So it creates a nice and seamless fit. Sometimes the things aren't too scaled, so I'm going to grab this, scale it smaller to match the same size, and then let it relax on its own, probably a little bigger. So to shell, and then it'll automatically relax it back together. And I can rotate this a little more so it's straight on, and I have his face right here. So some of these pieces still need some sewing together, so I'll grab these, move and sew, and that looks like mostly all the pieces have been connected now. The mouth is still pretty garbled, we gotta work on that. Here's the rest of the mouth pieces as well. So, but the face itself looks pretty nice and clear now. Except for the nose. Move and sew. Alright, so that should fix the nose. So UV mode, select everything to shell, apply, and that pretty uniformly scales it all. So let's fix up the mouth real quick. Let's grab some of these edges. That one can get sewn together. Let's move this down. Move this up because we don't want to have overlapping UVs. If they overlap, you can get some texture distortions. So I'll take all of these, and looks like it wants to overlap it again. So try and move that down as best I can to keep things from overlapping. Alright, and I can spend a little more time with that, but I guess you get the idea. Alright, so we have this, and the last thing is the mouth. So this part can get really tricky with it being so in-depth in there. And let's see where we can cut this apart. The fast way is just to planar map it straight down on the top, but I'm going to zoom inside of his head. Actually, just press 4 on the keyboard, and that'll put it in wireframe so I can kind of look at this. Let's go to face mode, and I'm going to grab the whole top of his mouth, and then get rid of all the rest of the face. If I deselect it here, it'll deselect all the rest there. And that. Alright, so it's pretty much just the top of his mouth. I can do a create UV planar mapping. Give me a nice plane. Go to the UVs and relax that. Then take the remaining of these. I'll grab all of these. Create planar map. 2 UVs and unfold those. Then I can move these and kind of try and find out where they're going to match together at. So edge mode looks like they're going to match to there. So move and so. And then grab both of these and try and scale them proportionally together. And it looks like those that could probably get wrapped around. So if I take edge here and here, cut those, and then take actually edge mode, cut them again, and this edge, move and so. That should even it out a little better. Alright, and that's kind of still a little jumbled in there. I'm not going to spend the time with the video tutorial trying to fix that, but you'd have to cut certain sections off and try and re-straighten it back out and glue it back together and put it in place. But more or less you get the idea of what's going to happen here. Let me scale that proportionally. It should be a lot smaller because that's going inside of his mouth. I'm going to put that down there, rotate it over here, take all of this, move this. You can see it's still too big to fit inside the texture. So I'm going to move that a little smaller, move it over there, put this back in texture mode, which is 6 on the keyboard. So 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded, and 6 is textured. Go to object mode, and you can see he has a checker pattern. His head is too small in comparison. He doesn't have enough equal detail. But that should work for now. We'll rescale these things later. So that works. We have everything textured so far. I could put a higher quality or denser one on there, but it still needs to be proportional with the rest of these. Alright, so that pretty much does that. I'm not going to spend the whole video doing all these pieces, so I'm just going to do one more piece that's kind of tricky. The hair could use a bit of work. I'm not going to finish this, but I'll give you a little bit more, and then the last piece I'll do is the body, because that could take a little bit of tricky work. So the hair, because he has all these pointed pieces sticking out, you can try and use automatic mapping, and you're going to get a whole bunch of different hair pieces, and it's a pretty big mess. What I also like to do is just to go from the top-down view and go to, if I click this little arrow key and double-click it, it pulls up the settings for the arrow, and the settings got hidden over here. Alright. So I can do camera-based selection, which is part of the settings if you double-click on the arrow. And if I do camera-based selection, whatever I grab will only be selectable from the view that I'm looking at. So you can see it didn't grab much from underneath of them. So I can try that again and just grab here, and so it only grabs the top-down view. So it misses all the pieces underneath, which means that I can planar map because I have one direction. So I've already done automatic. It's already picked some of them apart. But I can do planar mapping now, and it puts them all back together, just the certain pieces. Hold right click, hold control, hold right, go to UVs, and it selects the UVs for me. And I can move that out of the way and apply the unfold on it. And so I still have a whole bunch of other pieces to work with, but very quickly I've amassed a major part of his head. If I go back to the texture mode and drop, let's say, that on there, you can see that he's pretty much organized on the top view, but the rest of the sides aren't quite proportional, and they're still all over the place and need to be arranged. So it's going to take a little while to piece by piece figure out where these things are going to go. So if I go edge mode, and I can see it selecting over here, so I know that I'm on track with getting them, I can move and sew, and that adds that to there, UV to shell and apply. Then that starts to fix up the bottom or the back half of his hair. Put that back on 3. Alright, and so I could keep going at this point, but it's just going to be a long, tedious effort, especially with all these tiny little edge loops in there, trying to find out exactly where all these pieces are going to go. The end result of what I did with the hair on this one, you can see that I have the front peaks all out here, and then the back half, and then each different section of the hair is its own little area. So I still need to do a bit of work to kind of figure out where each piece is going to go and kind of orient it in a way that's recognizable. Let's see, grab. I got to go to click on the object, and now I can go to UV mode. Okay, so to shell, and then let's rotate that so it should be facing that direction because that's the front of his hair and that's the back of him. So alright, so that's how you would do the hair. I'm going to move all these, actually yeah, I'll move them off the board, so that's the hair. I'll get back to that some other time maybe, or not for the demo. Alright, so that's the hair getting started, and so the last piece I'll do is the chest piece, because that's kind of a large piece. And I'm going to do this one symmetrical, so if I do one half and I mirror the UVs, or if I mirror the geometry, it'll mirror the UVs and I won't have to do the other hand, the other foot, and everything else. So it just duplicates the UVs and saves me half the work. So that's much easier. So I'm going to go over here now, and I could try planar mapping the front of them, but I'm going to click automatic mapping, and again it's going to look perfect if I drag the shader on there. It looks great, but again it's going to be so many separate pieces we won't know what part of the jeans, what part of the shirt, because they're all mixed everywhere, so it's really not very helpful for us to paint. Unlike grabbing this guy, where I can tell these are the pants, these are his hands, these are his shirt pieces, that's his main shirt, these are all of his boots, they're all organized. This is the whole leather section, that's fabric section, this is mixed between armor and fabric and skin, which is going over here with his head and his hand, or head and hair. So all of it's kind of organized when I click on the majority of the character. Oops. So it's organized there. So, but going back to this one, I need to organize this. So really quickly, we'll go to edge mode, and we'll grab all these edges and move and sew. And that puts this together here. I'll grab these, move and sew. I'll grab this whole section, move and sew. And this section is, looks like it's his back area. So I'll grab these, move and sew. That puts that together. Looks like that, and that can get, oops, not the other side. That might need to get separated. So I can go try and find the edge on that one, which must be, that's somewhere in here. Let's go UV mode and try and work that out first. Okay, now I can find the edge. Edge mode, cut it. Has to be the edge mode first, and then I can cut it, and then I can go and send those back to there. So move and sew, that puts that over there, and unfold it so that relaxes a bit better, so you can start to see we have the legs and the body. When I did the I guess I'd like to not have a seam running down the middle of him or down the middle of the pants. So I'm going to go and put those into one piece. Before I duplicate that, it's best to do this whole other half, which will mirror over once I've finished the UVs. So it's best to finish the entire half before mirror it, and then separating them again separate later. So let's go over here to the face mode. And what I can do here for the sleeve, say grab all these major faces, which could take a while to grab all these. So let me go to selection, camera base, so it doesn't grab things that it can't see. I'll select, I guess, all of these here. And just keep running through. And if I hold Control and Shift and grab, it only grabs. Whereas if I don't hold Control and Shift, it could be letting go of pieces. So if I try and use Shift and grab the one, it lets go of these and grabs the others. So Control and Shift will only always grab. Alright, so that pretty much grabs all those pieces, and I'm going to deselect these. I don't need these. There we go. So that grabs pretty much one section of the sleeve. And then we can go with the new option called cylindrical mapping. I click the map on that, and the cylinder, you can kind of see, is kind of oriented in a way that doesn't help us too much. If I zoom out, you can see it's very distorted. If I click the little T right there, that gives us the transform option, and I can rotate the cylinder. You can see as I'm rotating the cylinder, it's changing the UVs. So I rotate the cylinder a little bit, and that makes it much easier to see what we're looking at. So now I can go Control, right click, 2 UVs, move these off the grid, and then go back to UV mode, grab this, and apply the relax, or apply the unfold. So it really quickly and cleanly works up all that. And let's go to edge mode and merge these back together. So I'll take all of these and move and so it puts it on that side, and the sleeve has a seam right down the middle, which is perfect because it's being cut there like it would naturally be, and separates it very quickly. The last thing is, let's do the arm real quick. So I'm going to turn off the only select through camera and just grab me everything. So I'll take all these pieces except for the hand. I don't want to grab the hand. Alright, and then none of these, so Control and deselect all of that, which deselects everything up here. So I should have everything I need selected here. We'll do cylindrical mapping again. Oops. I grabbed it all in edge mode. Control, right click, 2 faces. And that converts my selection to faces now. So now I can go cylindrical mapping and realign the map to an orientation that better suits his arm position. Alright, and that looks decent, so let's go 2 UVs and move that. And then let's apply the unfold option. Alright. And you can see pretty quickly we've already gotten the arm worked out. And the hand, I'm not going to unwrap that right now, but I'll show you how it gets unwrapped. It takes a little bit of time. So object mode, we got this guy. We'll go to face mode. So in order to unwrap this, what I did for this guy, there we go. Face mode. I grabbed the whole upper section of his hand and strategically kind of just grabbed which pieces are which. So once I had the whole upper section perfectly selected, I then did a quick planer, which gave me one hand, and then all that was left was the remaining hand. And then I sewed them together on the thumb, and that created the one hand from the front and back without a seam running down here. So if I drop this back on here, we can see that there's no seam, or there's a seam right here, but there's no seam right here. It makes it nice and even. all of it's textured, nice and clean. Let me grab all of this guy. Oops, object mode. Actually, one more thing. Let me finish up with this guy. So we've done. That's how the hand works. Assuming you've finished all of this, the next step is to go and delete off this half of the guy, and then we'll go mesh mirror geometry. It should already be set to the negative x direction. Apply it, and it pops it in here. Again, this is because the x is in the left and right direction, so we need the x direction. And it automatically mirrors the UVs, so it's perfect. It's already finished the UVs for us, assuming I had cleaned up all these. The downside is whatever I paint on this guy in Photoshop, the other arm gets the exact same thing because it's a mirror. So in order to avoid this mirror aspect, you have to separate your UVs. So in order to separate the UVs, let's go to face mode here, and I grab this face, and you can see it's overlapping the same one. So each piece is its own, they're sitting exactly on top of each other. So actually, let's go to UV mode. I'll grab this. Let me grab just that. And then go to shell, and it looks like it grabs everything, but if I move it off, you can see there's duplicates. And the reason it's duplicates is because I mirrored it across, and the mirror has matched them on top exactly. So what this will do now is that I can paint two separate colors. So for the boots, I can have two separate sets of wrinkles because I'll have two separate maps. And that should work. If I try and relax these again, unfold, it's probably going to try and flip the other one around because it's backwards because it got mirrored, so it wants to flip it and correct it. Polygons, unfold options. I can set the iterations to a much higher number. I should speed up the process. So it just tried to flip it, and that's why I got all distorted. So now if I try and rotate this around, you'll notice that it's symmetrical now. Oops. R for scale. So it's symmetrically matched now because it got flipped on the scale. So I've already done that on this guy right here. Let's click out of that guy. Alright, so I've already symmetrically matched it, so I have each piece two different arms, so this arm and that arm, this boot and that boot, and the different pieces of them. I'm not going to spend the time and unwrap all these pieces. I think you guys get the idea of how unwrapping works and the different steps and processes of it. So let me just quickly overview all the different pieces. So once you're ready to put all these pieces into one group, you would grab all the pieces that are finished. So let's say I've done these, I've done the hair, the face, the strap, the little bolt right there. All of the pieces are done. I never finished the, let's go to UV mode. I never finished these, so I'm just going to move these off for now. So the highest priority is probably going to be the face. That's what should have the most detail. I'll try and make that as large as it possibly can be and still maintain the details here. This armor piece, the squares are much tinier, so I need to make these smaller so that the squares are pretty uniform so that it matches the same as the chest. So now I can move this and fit this in place over here. I'll take these. These are pretty small, so I'm going to scale these until the squares match again the same size. Move that over here. Actually, I put the leather in the bottom section, so I have the leather section, the metal section, the face, skin section, and that makes it easier to texture in Photoshop. This one over here is the body. So I'll put the larger pieces in there first. So the body goes in there. The hair is way too large. Scale that down, move that in place, and the hair is still going to be too large. Let's scale it down a little more. Alright, and you just keep doing that and play Tetris. Just keep grabbing all your pieces to shell, scale it until these sleeves are about the same size as the rest of your shirt, and then move that into place. And eventually, once you've put all these pieces in this square right here, which let's jump over to here, you should have a finished guy. The sword has its own texture map. The reason the sword has its own map is because He could switch out swords throughout the game. He could get a different sword, in which case I don't want to put his sword attached to him, because I'll have to change his whole map, his whole textures and everything. So if it's a separate object, I might as well get a separate texture map. And the same thing could happen to the head or the body. If he's going to change his armor throughout the game, maybe his whole body should get its own map, and his head should get its own map as well. So depending on how you're going to do that. And since I have extra space here, I can put a second, maybe even a third sword here. So the same object can share 3 different maps, or vice versa. 3 different objects can share the same map if there's extra space. So you might as well, instead of putting 3 different maps in your game, you could put 1 map and have 3 different swords use the same map. That saves you the game engine resources to reuse your same map. So that should work for that. So skipping the sword, grabbing the guy again, and deselecting the sword because it's overlapping. Here's what you have for the end result. So I put the face over here in this corner. I put the tongue, or the throat, I guess that's the tongue, underneath of it. The throat's over here. These are some of the armor pieces. They go in his shoulder. I overlapped these 2. There's actually 2 pieces here, but since you're never going to see the underside of this armor and the underside of the other armor, there's no need to waste the texture space. You want to make sure everything is as condensed as you can possibly make it, because you're losing pixels in resolution if you have gaps in your textures. So you want to condense it and make it as big as possible and still fit everything in proportional relationship size. So if I go back to here, assign material to selection, and make everything on here, you can see that it has, everything is about the same grid size spacing that I can get. And so that's the end result, is to make all the textures the same. And get rid of the sword again. So the shirt is right here, the sleeves, the pants. The pants are sewn right in the middle, so the seam's going to be under the leg right down here, so I'm not going to see that as likely. And right on the back end, I guess, this is where the next seam is, so that seam's fine. So you want to hide the seams as best you can. I put the other seams for the shirt sliced up underneath of these stitches right here, so that works pretty well to hide those. And any sections on the hair that needed to have its seams hidden, I sliced those on the sharp edges underneath. So that should give you guys a rough idea of how to UV unwrap all the different tools we use. I kind of have my windows kind of situated like this so I can grab different aspects. Yeah, that should be about it. Once it's all said and done, we should be able to say take this kind of texture, assign it to there, and you can see it's all nice and uniform now. There's no streaking, no distortions. It looks quite nice. And I can even set this resolution to being let's say 10 by 10. Oops. And so when I zoom in now, close out that, you can see it looks a lot more realistic. It looks like I missed this piece. But so now he has fabric. There's no stretching, no distortions. It's nice and clean, nice and clear. And that's what our objective is for UV unwrapping. All right.